Hey everyone, so this is Patrick here, and we are here interviewing Simon Cottee. Is that correct, Simon?
Cottee, that's correct.
Hey
How are you going?
Simon, really excited to have you here on Cast the Archons. For those of you who don't know who Simon is, he is the amazing artist who did that rules comic for Cast the Archon. It's he goes by Montreal Wizard. Is that correct?
Yeah, Montreal Wizard. I used to be Wizard of Montreal, but that was when I was mainly covering Magic, the Gathering stuff. So
Uh-huh.
to get a bit away from the Magic label, I've become Montreal Wizard. Yeah.
So are you covering, besides Keyforge and Magic, what other games have you been covering?
Well, it was really just Magic was my kind of gateway back into TCGs, but it sort of broke my heart. So I've
Ooh,
refound that love through Keyforge.
there's a story there we might have to hear later.
Yeah, it's
So,
very dramatic.
so yeah, we're just gonna ask some questions, and we're just really excited for you to join us here tonight. So what's kind of your background when it comes to gaming, Simon?
I actually, I'm an animator by trade, and I initially tried to get into games animation when I was starting out. So I'd been much more of a gamer than like a TCG or board gamer or something. But growing up, I did play a lot of Magic, and then I think it's that period in your life where you get out of university and you re-find your love for the things that you used to love that you stopped playing because you were embarrassed when you were trying to meet like girls and stuff. So I basically systematically refound like Lego, like Magic cards and everything. So it's sort of a gateway back into all this. So yeah, at the moment it's Keyforge just all the time, really.
Yeah, it seems like you've really jumped deep into the Keyforge pond, if you will.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
It
And
sucked us all in.
go ahead, Matt.
It sucked us all in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
It's,
really has, hasn't it?
So can you tell us kind of how you found out about Keyforge, or what was your first interaction with Keyforge when you first
Yeah,
got to play?
I've got a group of friends here who that we've always playing board games and stuff together. As my friend Malcolm, who's Malcolm Sutherland, he's an amazing animator who I work with, and he sort of mentioned Keyforge to me, and I heard about it, and I was like, oh, whatever, just some other game. And then I went home like that day after he'd mentioned it and started reading about it. This was like a couple of months before release, and then I just started getting obsessed. Like then like fast forward, and I'm at the pre-release, just like waiting, like vibrating to open that first deck. So yeah, it really once it started, it didn't stop.
What was it? What was your first deck?
My first deck, it's still probably my favorite deck. It's called Donovan Westgarth's Teacher, and it taught me. It was really a beautiful deck.
Isn't it funny how your first deck, like I feel that way about my first deck too. It's one of my favorite decks.
Yeah, it's
Same
the
here.
only deck I have that I feel like is evenly balanced, like compositionally between like actions and creatures and artifacts. All my other ones are like so swingy. Yeah.
So was it that first deck that just kind of just clicked for you completely? Like it was your big moment to tying yourself to Keyforge?
Yeah, I think as well that I feel like a bit like this game was built to trigger certain parts of my brain. Like I've always been obsessed with procedural generation and randomization of things. Like I love that. Like we used to while playing things like Dungeons and Dragons, is we would build these huge lists of random generation to build names and to build locations. And so I've always been obsessed with the creative potential of randomization to spark creativity. And I think with Keyforge, it's the every deck has a story and every deck has an actual name, and you build that relationship, and it's individualized because of that randomization. So
Right. Yeah. So like with the randomization and stuff, like have you found a favorite combo that you just love? Something that just happens in decks that you've seen or that you have that you can't get enough of?
yeah, I think there's certain things like I always enjoy like those untamed, just huge amber gain decks. Like that deck I was telling you about, my first deck, it's got two hunting witches, two full moons, like a witch of the eye.
Two hunting
Oh,
witches.
Jesus.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that
and
sounds
it's
like a
got
dirty
that.
combo.
Yeah, what's that card that returns like three cards back to its
Nature's
owner's
Call.
hand? Yeah, so like I've done the calculations, and in a certain turn you can make like well over 20 amber if you get it all working right. But I mean, then someone just bait and switches
That
you,
is
and
unfortunate.
Bait and switch
yeah,
or good
too
old
much to
diss.
protect or something like that.
That's
Yeah.
why you need key charge.
Yeah, it doesn't have one, sadly.
So what inspired you to do this comic in the first place? Like you were just like looking at the rules, and you're like, somebody needs to make a comic for this or what? Like
Yeah.
where did that come from?
Well, it goes back a bit to my when I was getting into Magic: The Gathering, and I started this comic up that was about my experience attending draft events at Magic, and I ended up making a rules comic just because I was learning the game, and it was a great way for me to relearn, and that was quite successful. So, and I saw how a lot of people who aren't really into the sort of just reading through your rule books and stuff, and how rewarding that can be for me to create that and see other people's reaction, and also just a way for me to learn the game. So that was kind of the impetus for making that comic, and it's also a great way to get seen within a community, and especially a new community like Keyforge. We're in a brand new community. This is it right now. Like we're sitting in it. So it's a great way for community building to also help ease people into the game, because while it's accessible, it can be intimidating if you're not used to some of the basics.
I'm really loving the Keyforge community, like interacting on Twitter and Facebook and all the different places. Like it's just an amazing community. I know there's a few places where it gets a little goofy, but I think the vast majority of people are just really friendly, and especially like at least locally, real life, like everybody's just super welcoming. If a new player is showing up to an event, people just help them out. I'm really enjoying the community.
Yeah, I feel like it's the nature of the game almost, right? Like the barrier to entry and the ease of learning and playing just like basically makes it so easy for it to be a casual atmosphere. It's almost part of the culture built into the game, where it's just easy for everybody, whether you're super hardcore and you bought 100 decks and you're searching for that perfect deck so that you can have this, go to these beast archon tournaments and be the best. It's still very easy for that person to go to a sealed event and just play casually with everybody else who's not as hardcore, right? So it's kind of nice to I guess it's, like I said, it's just built into the culture of the game, I find.
Yeah, I think there's also an element of acceptance that is built in as well. Like because of the nature of the decks being randomized, is if you're failing or things aren't going your way, like there's only so much you personally can do about that. I find that you have to kind of accept what's happening, and if you have a heavy loss, you'll just be like, okay, that was maybe a bit out of my control, maybe it wasn't. And I think that sort of helps breed a healthier relationship versus something where you've built your perfect deck and then it still fails and you're like, why? Is it me? Am I the problem?
I've so been there. I've so been
there. So you got a new comic you're working on. Tell us about that.
It should be coming out tomorrow morning, actually. It's basically the follow-up to the rules comic. So what I'll do is I'll screen share a little bit for you, just so you can sort of see a bit of the process that I go through as well.
You're going to want to give some play-by-play for those just listening on the cast.
Yeah. So this is so I had an initial Keyforge rules comic that was received really well by the community, and it was just the basics of the rules. It's all your basic creature play and everything like that. So now I've been working on, it's pretty huge. This is the part 2. So we're going into everything else basically. So this is it with the artwork. This is the software that I use. But so we're going through mulligans and archives and creature placements, flanks, armors, amber bonuses, play abilities, action abilities, like everything down to like poison, which doesn't come up that often. Things like
I particularly like the taunt frame. I'm going to make people who are listening, they're going to have to find this comic live to check out the taunt frame, but it's pretty hilarious.
Yeah. It's basically me trying to taunt people into getting angry at me, and I think I found a good way to do it. So you can look online to find that. But yeah, that should be coming out tomorrow morning, and that's been fun, but also has been quite painful. This part of it, because these are the fiddly rules. It's easy to tell someone about placing a creature, but to explain the rule of 6 or just to explain armor, that was very complex. There's a lot of little elements happening with armor within this game.
Yeah, but you know what I really like about these comics, Simon, is that even reading the first comic, it kind of makes the rules a little more sticky in your brain, And so I think this comic, even more so, is going to be really helpful to players because they're going to read it and you cover a lot of those keywords that sometimes they don't stick in our brain as well. And you're like, oh yeah, what does that word do? And right? And so I think this comic's going to be really nice because it's gonna
Yeah.
it's just gonna help everybody remember some of those keywords a little
It helps
easier.
me. Like I learned a lot. I try and get other people who are much better at the game to look at it before I make it, so they can correct all my mistakes. And there's certain things like today I had to make an amendment to it because I was saying that stun, the only action a creature can do is unstun itself, but that's technically not true in some weird situations. More that it's through it performing an action it breaks its stun. You know,
Right.
so like these little wording things that can make can create an argument and at a table. You know, I'm trying to avoid that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, we want to continue to support you. I really appreciate all you're doing
Hey,
with
thanks
this.
so much.
But you have one more story you have to share. Tell us about this magic thing, this Fallout.
Yeah. I was probably going to. I did a comic that sort of was a little bit about it previously, but it was around the time that the Eldrazi expansion came out, and a lot of the things that killed Magic for me a bit, I'm worried about could potentially happen with Keyforge in the future as well. So I plan on exploring that. But for narrative is a big thing for me. Like I work in film and development of narratives, and I came to the realization that magic is a huge ball in motion. It's already going. So coming into it now, you realize that the game's not for you. It's for an existing community that's already there. So the things that upset me, which was like, because when I used to play Magic, you know, I was a wizard. I'm a wizard, and I got some like cool skeletons, and I'm like, this is great. And then coming back into it, it's like, no, now you're a planeswalker. You're like a cool heartthrob teenager, and there's giant spaghetti Eldrazi monsters, and I just couldn't hold on to anything anymore. Like the theme was, I felt a bit too forced, and narratively a bit forced.
Interesting.
That was one of the things that, and also just the realization of the upkeep of the game itself. Like I remember the day I built one deck. I went and I bought singles, and I built this deck. It was partially net decked, and then I played my friends, and they all lost really bad, and I didn't have fun, and they didn't have fun, and that was it. It killed the game for me. That moment, I had too much power in my hand, you know. Whereas Keyforge, you can't have that.
Well, yeah, totally. Yeah, especially as it'll be interesting with this new power level system. I'm curious to see how that works.
Yeah, but my warning, I think that I plan to explore about Keyforge and its development is sort of narrative and thematically, and I think I've got a theory about the future of Keyforge that Bad Penny is the sort of the linchpin or the key to where we could maybe predict this is heading as a character, as a theme. Like I predict in our next expansion, like characters, like heroes within the narrative are going to start emerging, and we'll learn who those are. And I think Bad Penny is going to be kind of a large pushing force.
Yeah, if Bad Penny wasn't, you know, the mascot of the game before, it feels like she definitely is now. I think everybody. I mean, if you're going to make a card that just never basically leaves the table, it's just
and you build a relation. I love Bad Penny as a card. I love Dex as well. Like these cards that you have to build a relationship with just because you have to deal with them. You know? But I would much rather see Dex. I want to see him develop. You know, he's got like body horror on him. The Logos Dexter card.
Yep.
Anyway, so I'm interested to see where all this happens, and I'm really excited where it's going, but I'm also nervous. But you know, that understandably, maybe, as we all maybe
no, definitely understand. FFG has done a great job thus far, but it's still fragile. That's the way.
Yeah, and I play X-Wing, right? X-Wing miniatures. So I got to see sort of 1.0 get itself to a point that they had to destroy it and rebuild it. You know, so I'm nervous, a little bit nervous. But the 2.0 of X-Wing is pretty fantastic. So I'll give them credit.
Agreed.
Yeah, I hear. I was actually a big X-Wing player myself, and I got to the point in X-Wing, you know, the original, where I was just done, and I sold everything and spent all that money on Destiny, and and I was just done with X-Wing. And now that 2.0's come out, like 6 months after I sold my stuff, now I'm kind of interested again. So
yeah, they're pulling you back.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's really, you know, potentially, like you said, you're scared for Keyforge for that reason. Potentially Keyforge has a built-in element of protection against that.
Yeah, that's the hope, right?
Because of the nature of the game, and because we don't know whether or not it's going to have rotation. we don't know anything, right, at this point. But they could easily decide, a few sets down the road that the current rotation or the current set is no longer legal, right?
Yeah.
And the nice thing is that those decks are still full decks that you could still play with your friends and family and bring to the stores, etc. But yeah, they might have something built in, to protect against that.
There's so much unknown with this game. That's why it's fun to talk about.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that the algorithm and everything would just get more and more, and so things become more unique, and the balance. Like, I want to see this get out of hand from the developers. I want to put my trust in an algorithm. Like, I want to see where this can take us. So, but maybe that's a horrible place.
Well, I mean, it'd be really cool. I find it'd be really cool if, like, when they make the next set, that when you buy a deck from the next set, that the card pool isn't just 350 or so cards from that set, but now we're dealing with 700 cards from both sets, and then eventually 1,000 cards, and then decks will really be extremely unique, right? Versus right now there's only so many combinations. I mean, it's still a huge amount, but it'll get exponentially there are still decks that play very similarly currently, right? And there might be a scenario down the road where decks will come out and be like, there may only be one card between mine and yours in each of our decks, whereas right now, if we both sit down with a Brobnar deck, there's a good chance we have 6 or 8 cards that are the same.
Yeah, it's when you see the guy playing Shadows across the table and you're just waiting for that card that's going to ruin any fun you were having before.
Steal all your amber
after your huge Untamed turn.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
Anyway, I'm very excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people find your work?
So you can find me at the website is just montrealwizard.com. Or I'm on Twitter I think I'm just at Simon Cottee. So Cottee is Cottee. And that's pretty much it. I've got an unupdated website that's called simoncottee.com. That there's not much point going there.
You're real active on Twitter though, so if people want to reach out to you, it seems like
if anyone wants to talk, for sure, man.
Cool, awesome. Well, Simon, thank you so much for coming on here and doing this interview.
I'm a big fan of the cast, so it's a pleasure for me.
And everybody check out the new comic tomorrow, or if you're listening to the podcast, it's probably today. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll
Thanks
have to have you on again sometime.
Yeah, cheers, Audrey, Patrick, and Matthew. Right? I got that right.
Yep.
You got it right. Impressive. Nice. Well done. All right. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, see you guys.